welcome to episode 10 of The Neverending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson, and this episode I'm going to be talking a little bit about politics, mostly in a really general way, but what I want to focus on is the downfall of left and right in politics. By that I mean the left and right wing. Recently, I was in the United States just for a brief time, and we're very close to Washington, D.C., and I was very curious to see what we would see, as it was only a few days before the election. But it was actually really quiet. Most of the places there, you wouldn't even have guessed that there was a big election about to take place. But the election is kind of why I wanted to discuss this topic now, because it really feels like the two-party system and the two-ideology system is really not working. Democracy is a strange thing. It's been around obviously for a long time in many different forms. You can see how varied it is by just how different democracy is in the countries where it's being practiced. The American system is often so confusing, it's hard to even understand how it works and how it's ended up that there's still only two parties. Here in Canada, of course, we've got about 5 different parties. And sadly, they all seem to be pretty much reflecting very similar views. There's only like a handful of ideas that seem to be pretty consistently labeled as either left wing or right wing. The right wing is always pretty much anti-abortion. The left wing seems to be for gay marriage. But other than that, honestly, it can be quite culturally specific how different parties organize their beliefs and what kind of policies that they support. So I would say, historically for me, I would have been pretty classically left wing. I definitely identified myself as a liberal fairly young. I definitely like the idea of social freedom. I don't believe that we should be married with children. I don't think that that's something necessary. I don't think marriage is necessary. I think maybe having some kind of contractual agreement between people and families for a relationship might be a good idea, but it's very hard to implement, and it's very hard to categorize people based on their relationship to each other. So that kind of seems to be the main issue. The right wing seems to really always be promoting this nuclear family, mom, dad, kids, and lots of kids. Now, the issue that I have with the left wing is that actually most people on the left wing are identical to that. They're identical to the right wing. They are married with children as well, and they often support the exact same lifestyle that the right wing supports. We talk a lot about the religious right and how conservative they are, but look at what happened in the United States. The right-wing party, the Republican Party, is run by someone who's had several wives, who's definitely not been monogamous, definitely does not follow the family values paradigm. He's not an upstanding citizen with a wonderful wife and children. He's got very strange marriage and divorces in the past and all kinds of sexual immorality associated with him. So the idea that he is symbolizing now the right wing is very strange. It's very strange times. And I think that the right wing and the left wing are really like mixing and in some ways reversing themselves and in many ways becoming unrecognizable to what they may have been a generation or 2 generations ago. So to go back in time a little bit, the whole idea of left wing and right wing, according to Wikipedia anyway, goes all the way back to the French Revolution. And basically the left wing were the people in Parliament on the left side who wanted revolution, they wanted change. And the people on the right side were those who did not want change. They wanted things to remain the same. Now, the problem with these kind of divisions with saying, oh, the group that want things the same and the group that wants things to change is that such a strange way to categorize different changes and policies. So the problem with that right and left ideology system is, of course, things have changed dramatically since the French Revolution. They've changed dramatically in the last few generations. The so-called left wing has been in power many times now, and often it goes back and forth, left, right, change, no change. But they don't really follow that anymore. So a lot of the conservatives are not following what is happening right now, and they don't want things to stay the same. We have a conservative government in charge right now in Alberta, and she's making all kinds of changes, and I don't really even know why or what they're for. Some of them seem to be good, some of them seem to be bad, some of them are very, very strange and very, very specific. So she's definitely not keeping things the same. Now, the excuse would be, well, we're just going to change the things that have been changed. But that's so convoluted and such a kind of shallow way to categorize whether something is good or bad or whether you agree or not with something. The idea of just always going with change and always going with a new thing is crazy. That's such a unstable, risky way to live. Sometimes those new things are good, sometimes they're bad. The fact that they're new doesn't determine whether they're good or bad, doesn't determine whether they will work or not. So the idea that you just need to embrace every single new thing that comes along is why we have these dramatic trend changes. And trends can be really dangerous. I mentioned it before when I was talking about food, because a lot of times when people jump on a bandwagon about something and you get suddenly millions of people wanting the same thing, well, we didn't arrange our society to allow for that kind of thing. They didn't allow for a sudden trend and everybody wants a new Apple Watch or whatever it is. And in the next generation or even a few years down the road, suddenly nobody wants that anymore. Now they have too many. So you can't really keep up with those kind of trends and those kind of changes. And the fact is, if you want to be objective about it, a lot of those new ideas are going to be wrong. And some of them might be right, but in order to get them right, we really need to have a system in place that determines whether or not these policies are actually working. And as far as I can tell, I've never heard any political party claim any uncertainty whatsoever in the beliefs in their own policies. And they've never put anything in place to assess whether it's working or not and whether or not they should possibly change it if it isn't. So already we have a system that's not following any kind of objective rules, no objective outcomes. So it's not scientific at all. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that I have with the left wing. It really doesn't follow facts. As I've been doing research into global politics and various other things, I've been quite shocked at just how few facts are actually being represented in the current left-wing ideologies. In fact, what they're doing is quite the opposite, is they're taking science and they're treating it as some kind of team sport where you are virtue signaling to everyone around you that you believe in this scientific principle or that scientific principle without having any evidence whatsoever, without doing any research whatsoever. Now, a lot of people criticize the current right wing because a lot of people are quote unquote do their own research. And often it's just watching videos, maybe even just watching a video like mine on the internet. Well, I'm not the expert on everything. So if all of the information you're getting in the world is just from listening to me, then that's going to be very limited. And the same with any other video that's being shown on the internet. If you go to university, you realize just how rigorous it is to do research and just how many different perspectives you might find. If you're going to go to a library and read a lot of books, you're going to get further ahead than you are if you just watch a bunch of very edited videos and memes online. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people are following and calling that research. So we've got these very bizarre, mixed ideas on the so-called left wing and right wing, and they're looking more and more like each other to the point where even though we have 5 different parties in Canada, most of them are actually advocating to do the same policies. And what's even more frightening is that every time a government gets power, they rarely follow what they say they were going to do. So they don't actually do the things that they promised to do during their campaign. So that is really, really frustrating. And it has demoralized, I think, a lot of people. And it's demoralized me in my belief in democracy because it's hard to really point to any system that works very well. But I think for me, the sort of final point where I just really lost faith was a few years ago when we had an election here in Alberta. And one of the questions was whether or not we should keep daylight savings time. Now, the way that this question was worded was very confusing. So, what I would like is the question of, should we keep changing our time twice a year? That would be the ideal question, I think, because it's the time change that's so frustrating. I don't really care what the original time is or like what we focus on, what time 7 a.m. is or 7 p.m. I just want it to stay the same because it's silly. And yeah, it does take me a while to change my sleep schedule. I have, a very difficult time in the morning. It's been my whole life that I have struggled to get going in the morning. And yeah, it's very frustrating. So I have a new hour every fall. We had it recently, but after a week, it doesn't really make much difference. But yet you made everybody go through all of these changes for no real actual benefit. There's such a small group of people that have a benefit, and the only reason they do is because they get up early. So we've changed this entire system just to a small group of morning people will continue to have those lighter hours in the morning, stealing it away from the evening people like myself who now have to be completely in the dark. So anyway, what I started to think, like, what if that is the whole case? What if that is all of our politics in a nutshell right there? Morning people versus night people. And it's all based on preference. So if there's more morning people, then they're going to get their way, and the night people get nothing. It's silly. It's based on these personal preferences, and often people make decisions on politicians based on how much they like them as a person. But that doesn't really matter that much. I would like someone with an exceptional mind and exceptional abilities that is a lot smarter than everyone else. But there's this hatred for the elite, whatever that means. Most of those people that complain about the elite would be considered elite by someone else. And equating having money with being intelligent or having some other elite capabilities is also really silly. There's a lot of stupid rich people and there's a lot of very smart poor people, and the amount of money that you have doesn't really determine what your IQ is. Now, it's not about IQ either. Obviously we are more complex than that. But what if there is no good way to really lead? Or what if there is no good way to really run the government? I'm not sure. I mean, that is a possibility. It seems pretty hopeless. So now we have a right wing that is not at all for family values or any of that. And we have a left wing that seems to be all for family values. We have a left wing that supports archaic institutions like marriage and having children, that advocates for the sale and trafficking of human beings, doesn't seem to feel that that's a big deal at all. We have a left wing that promotes very dangerous medical interventions in people, often even advocating forcing those medical interventions on people even if they don't want them. This is not an ethical left wing. That's not something that I want to get behind. You can argue all day about whether or not you think vaccinations are good or bad, but that's the wrong question. That's the wrong answer. We should be looking at what is the best according to the science and what is the best for the individual. And if we really did that, then we would find a very different world where we had things like testing people's immunity first before offering any vaccinations. Now, that's expensive to do, and that's a big reason why it's not done. But that would be the correct way to look at it. And if we really were able to follow the best possible outcome for human beings now, we would be having a blast. We would be having so much fun. People would be enjoying their lives. But we don't, because we have this dark side. The dark side of humanity is, I think, prominent. And I think what shocks me is, religious people, or even like not religious, but a lot of the technophiles right now that have a very dark view of humanity and a very dark view of the future and seem to be fine with that. And I think that really scares me. They just want people to suffer. And I can't get behind that. I think that we should be able to use enough to have a good quality of life. But in order to do that, we have to have a lower population. And of course, that's an issue that both the left wing and the right wing have rejected. Now we have both the left and the right promoting higher population and lower quality of life. Maybe not for everyone. The right wing seems pretty open to having a small group of rich people at the top enjoying their lives. So we have now this deeply offensive, very exclusive ideology on the left wing, promoting dangerous technology, promoting dangerous medical treatments, and really vilifying people for questioning that, which is really just driving more people to the right wing. And I find that very disheartening because the right wing is still full of terrible ideas and it hasn't really improved. It's just gotten sleazier and darker and uglier and dumber, and unfortunately the left wing has also gotten dumber. It really is a case of democracy and de-evolution, where we have allowed the least amongst us to have the most power. We have all of these celebrities that might be famous for acting or music, and they made millions of dollars, and they're the ones controlling poor people now. And they're doing it in the guise of charity and philanthropy, but really it's just meddling in other people's affairs, in other cultures that are really so different. But what I'm saying basically is the left wing has gotten itself wrapped up in a whole pile of politics that I find deeply troubling and offensive and very dangerous. I am now just as afraid of the left wing as I am of the right wing. And I think maybe part of that is why Kamala Harris didn't win, is because she has aligned herself with this left-wing ideology that supports things like extremist Islam, that supports things like marriage and children, all of these right-wing ideologies. And they've repackaged it and pretended that now it's left-wing and that you're somehow being like racist or I don't know what. Like it's just very mind-blowing. I don't recognize the left-wing anymore. I certainly don't recognize the Green Party. I used to vote Green every time, and I thought I would vote Green for the rest of my life until the Green Party got big enough that people would actually vote for it more and they would eventually get power. Wow, was I wrong. They've gone down a path that is not green at all. It's a very gray and it's boring and it's exactly like the other left-wing parties. So there's no difference. I can't tell any difference there would be whatsoever if you voted Green or if you voted NDP. Now, I don't even know if there's any difference if you vote NDP or if you vote Conservative. So it's tough times for politics. We're in a place where nobody is protecting nature. Everybody is very self-involved. The left wing has become very exclusive, so they have gotten addicted to cancel culture. So anybody that they don't like, they just cancel. Now, sometimes you need to cancel someone out of your life. I get it. Sometimes you just can't handle certain people or certain views. I've blocked people enough, but it goes beyond that. When you're in a position of public office or when you're trying to be, you can't play that game because what you're doing is shutting out all of those people that might have a discussion with you that are going to be the people that you convinced to switch sides and to follow your side, right? So how can you just cancel those people out and ignore them and pretend they don't exist? That's not going to help your case. And I see that happening a lot on the left wing. I think the other issue with the left wing is the psychology part of it, that they're treating psychology like it's an objective science when it's not. And I do think psychology and cancel culture have a lot in common, because that's become the trend, to just shut out people that you don't agree with. And you hear that kind of attitude a lot when people say, get rid of toxic people out of your life. Well, that's fair enough, You don't want to hang out with everyone. I get it. There's a lot of people I don't want to hang out with. But shutting toxic people out of your life doesn't mean they're going to disappear. So what you're doing is you're just sweeping these issues under the rug. They're not going to go away. They may resent you a lot now that you've canceled them and you've gotten rid of them. And they will fight back. So now you have enemies. And now you have conflict. So that's not a solution. Your emotional well-being is not more important than the well-being of the entire planet or all of humanity. And in order to be a leader, you need to go beyond those exclusions. You need to go beyond that canceling Those kind of games for politicians or people in charge of others are a dead end. You need to be able to go beyond that. You need to be able to have open discussions and conflict with people that you disagree with. For a regular person that wants to hide in the shadows, perhaps you can get away with that. But the fact that people celebrate canceling other people, I find very disturbing. And I tend to think, do you really understand where the other people are coming from? Do you really understand what it is that they're saying? So as a strategy, if we want to get into the politics of it, that is a losing strategy. There's a reason why they say, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. Because you want to know what those people that are against you are up to. If you care about your future, and of course you can just give up and say, well, there is no future, so who cares? But don't celebrate excluding people out of your discussion and out of your politics just because it makes you feel better temporarily. You really got to be careful about what issues you take on yourself as an individual. And if it's a group of people that's not you and that you don't belong to, you need to be very careful. I hope we can find a new party platform somehow, and it's mainly for the people that are behind one concept, and one concept that I like and that I defend and that I focused on, and that's nature. Where are the nature people? They're not in the Green Party. They're not in the NDP. I don't see any of them. I think most of them are just disillusioned with politics. That's the party that I want to see, is the reality party. Can we deal with reality? Can we deal with nature as it is? Can we deal with human nature as it is? In order to deal with human nature, you have to understand how many different kinds of people out there are and how many different ways of life they want to live. Some people love getting up at 5 in the morning. Other people don't. You can't force everyone to get up at 5 in the morning just because you like that lifestyle. That's not fair. So it seems minor, being a night person or a morning person, but what if that is our whole politics? We need to entertain the idea that our individual differences can lead to huge changes in how we view other people and how we judge other people. If we focus on everyone being happy, at least as much as we can, and you're not going to be happy every day for any reason, happiness is one emotion and it's fleeting. But I think if we looked at that as how do we make most people happy, and stop thinking about how it will make you happy, and start to look and listen and really understand other people and understand human nature. And I wish more politicians would do that, would really try to understand human nature and go to those people that are the most opposite to you and try to figure out what they're about. And you may figure something out. If we really work hard at it, we should be able to find a way to keep most people somewhat happy most of the time. It's not a utopia, but it's something better than what we've got going, which is chaos and stupidity and getting dumber and dumber and more small-minded and allowing all these algorithms and AI to keep us in our little boxes and unaware of the world around us. Your politics that you hold most precious to you, question those the most. That's my advice for today. Hope you enjoyed my talk today. This is the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson, and have a good couple weeks. Thank you.